The Great Pennsylvania Circle Hunt of 1760 involved a group of roughly 200 men who, armed with muskets, rifles, knives, pitchforks, and the like, formed a circle 30 miles in diameter and closed in on this circle, killing every animal they could as they moved in on the circle. By the end of the day, they'd killed upwards of 1,000 animals whose carcasses they burned at the end of the day. Hunts like this occurred in that region between the 1750s and the 1850s, and they were held ostensibly to clear the land of predators. The settlers claimed that their livestock was being predated, and so held these hunts to do that. The hunts were considered fantastic social events and sporting events, and were glorified in both poetry and prose in publications like Hunting Sports of the West. Meanwhile, in the Old World, in 1792, a man named the Reverend William Gilpin, whose face should be appearing shortly, so around the same time, but back in the United Kingdom, the Reverend William Gilpin published a book, or a series of essays called On Picturesque Travel, On Picturesque Beauty, On Sketching the Landscape, and a poem. He basically wrote treatises on what was considered to be appropriate subject matter for a picture. So he hated smooth. He thought anything smooth or straight lines or anything beautiful was a disgusting thing to have in a picture. You wanted to have things that were craggy and rough and shaggy, oxes versus horses, for example. And he sort of notoriously said that Tintern Abbey, pictured here, would benefit from a mallet being taken to it to make it more ruinous and therefore a better subject. And he sort of like, around that time, touring the countryside in England became a popular thing to tour and write and do sketches, and also not just sketch, but discuss the picturesque qualities of a landscape. For many years, I've been buying old landscape drawings on eBay, and I draw and paint animals into those existing landscapes. And it turned out that most of the works I was buying came from England and came out of this tradition. So I draw the animals in watercolor or gouache, and I match the palette of the existing image in a way to really sink that creature into the landscape, even though it doesn't really belong there. And I just think of them as sort of snippets of a narrative that perhaps the audience can fill in the blanks. This is a great example of, this was done in 1859. And it's a great example of the picturesque, the sort of rough pathways, the dilapidated wall, the crags, the mismatched roofs, and the weeds, like Gilpin would have. Hey. Gilpin would have really liked this. Anyway, so while I was working on this series, I was thinking a lot about the circle hunt, because I thought it was something that was rich with imagery and would have been a great art project. So what I wanted to do originally, and wrote a grant proposal to draw all the animals who were killed in that Pennsylvania hunt, almost 1,000 animals. That proposal was turned down. But in the meantime, a colleague suggested that I write a proposal that included a road trip, because apparently juries really like road trips. And so I wrote a proposal that I would visit the known locations of circle hunts in Ohio and Pennsylvania. There was 3 I knew of, and I would draw the landscapes there in the style of William Gilpin, and then draw the animals back into them that I knew had been killed in these slaughters. And so that was my proposal, and so intrepidly, I drove across North America with my boyfriend of 2 months in a Japanese import right-hand drive Mitsubishi, this van. And I would never recommend that you drive across the Midwest in late August. It's excruciatingly hot. The food is really terrible. And don't ever take a right-hand drive through the States. They don't import them there, and if it breaks down, it's really hard, if not impossible in this case, to get it fixed. This is the worst meal I had on my trip. It's a chicken fried steak with white gravy, asada tater tots, and garlic bread served on a stainless steel platter. And it's a little bit misleading, maybe, to say it was the worst meal I had, because I actually couldn't eat it. So I don't know, I ate a lot of other bad things. But very soon we arrived in Hinckley, Ohio. Now Hinckley still celebrates the hunt that happened there on Christmas Eve of 1818 in an event called Buzzard Days, because apparently the buzzards started visiting Hinckley on account of all the carcasses left behind after the Great Hinckley Hunt. We also went to Beech Creek. Beech Creek was filled with American flag bunting and church declarations from God all over the place. Traveling through these small towns I found really uncomfortable, and I had somewhat anticipated that, but not completely. The reality of being in a small town with 500 people maybe in a right-hand drive vehicle, sketching landscapes. And this is the region where the Pennsylvania hunt probably happened. And so, but nevertheless, we forged ahead. We spent about 10 days in the Hinckley Reserve, which is probably where, or very likely where the Hinckley Hunt was centered upon, and I started drawing the landscapes there. Another problem I had with the project is I actually hate drawing landscapes, and especially trees, and and actually trying to incorporate William Gilpin's sort of guidelines was excruciating. Like, it was just very difficult. I mean, he wrote 200 years ago about how to paint the landscape, and I think nowadays any hand that's sort of like held touch screens, like taps on keyboards, uses microphones, it's like I don't think that our hands can even possibly enter that ethos that of 200 years ago, and it was impossible to kind of create the marks that they created at that time. And so it was a very difficult project. I'm hoping to one day go back and do the project I actually wanted to do with the 1,000 animals who were killed, and I don't think I'll have time to list them, but they actually kept an inventory: 41 panthers, 109 wolves, 112 foxes, 114 mountain cats, 17 black bears, and the list goes on.